All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to tell all of you thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak. But as we always say here at Chin Check Sports Radio, we do this because we love it, as we are simply sharing our passions with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. This is the topic we definitely wanted to touch on, something that has kind of been bothering us in the world of professional boxing, and really from its fan base and the thought process of fan base. And it's a term that we coined called the Mayweather Effect. Now, we like to think that we created a term, but I'm sure there have been other articles online about it, but something that we definitely wanted to touch on. And we definitely want to talk about how things, quote, called effects have a way of affecting people's attitudes, beliefs, behavior, mindset, or things, quote, effects. Something small can have a very dramatic effect. So one effect that you all have probably heard is called the Streisand effect. The Streisand effect was a term named after the famous singer and actress Barbra Streisand, who a photo was taken of her home in Malibu to document coastal erosion. Her attorney tried to suppress the photograph, and it made people only want to find out more or dig into the photograph more and find out more about why they're trying to hide this photograph. Now, in psychology, is a term called psychological reactance, that when you try to control people's behavior, when you try to hide things from them, it's only going to make people dig even further. It's going to want to make people find out the truth. We can go back to the Watergate scandal and the late former President Richard Nixon, trying to conceal and use his presidential powers to cover up, if any, involvement inside of the Watergate scandal, and it only made people want to dig in even more. He tried firing this person, firing that person, suppressing tapes, closing this, closing that, but it only made people want to dig further to see what, if any, involvement that he had in the Watergate scandal that ultimately brought his presidency down. There was a recent situation of a famous person who had issues with emails and laptops and trying to suppress it. It only made people want to dig further to find out the truth. So I think human nature, when you try to limit the information, when you try to control the information, is only going to want to make people dig further. However, I think the thought process has changed recently, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, where if you look at our news cycle, I think people prefer affirmation instead of correct information. How many times have you gotten into debates and discussion with people, and you laid out facts and data and statistics, and their response is, well, this is how I feel, and nothing's going to change that. So the Streisand effect is there. It's still there, but I think the world and people's mindset is starting to change about that. The second effect that you all might have heard of is called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect, it is the belief that a butterfly simply flapping its wings has a power to cause a typhoon. Well, we know that really can't happen, but the idea behind the butterfly effect is something so small having a greater effect later on down the line, or something so small can have catastrophic events. The most famous example of a butterfly effect is the fall of Constantinople. Historians will tell you that the fall of Constantinople, it ushered in the modern age. It ushered in a new modern era of science, modern era of warfare. It ended pretty much the Roman Empire, brought us out of the medieval ages, changed warfare, because warfare back then, a lot of cities used high walls, and they were able to breach the walls through a 53 or 55-day siege. So that is seen as a butterfly effect. The fall of that city had world ramifications. There's a belief, if you look at all the 300 movies in the war between the Greeks and the Persians, the fact that the Greeks were able to hold off the Persians and actually defeat the Persians in a lot of battles is why we know Greek history versus Persian history. So again, that butterfly effect, something so small, can have great effects later on down the line. Now, the Mayweather Effect is a term that we coined based off the famous boxer Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated world champion Floyd Mayweather. Now, we've told you that Mayweather is the best fighter that we've seen, hands down, not even close. We did our review on that 4 years ago, so really nothing to go back and really break down his career. We did it, and please go check the archives on that. But Mayweather's career, especially after the Oscar De La Hoya fight in 2007, Floyd Mayweather was a genius in marketing his undefeated record. He went from Pretty Boy Floyd to Floyd Money Mayweather. Even though he was a brash, cocky Pretty Boy Floyd, but Money Mayweather, his personality, his self-aggrandizement, his bloviating, it really turned off a lot of people. Now, we were able to look past that as boxing fans because we respected the talent in the ring. But what Floyd did, he brought a lot of casual fans who really paid their hard-earned money to want to see him lose, because people was itching for Mayweather to lose, so they could simply say he was overrated and he really wasn't that good. So you had your pure boxing fans who enjoyed the artistry and poetry and emotion that was a Floyd Mayweather in the ring, and then you had an equal amount of people who wanted to see Floyd Mayweather lose. Go back to the famous fight between him and Manny Pacquiao, the Showtime Twitter poll. More people thought that Manny Pacquiao would actually win that fight, and a lot of people till this day I've spoken to boxing fans who said that Mayweather should step into the ring with Canelo now, and that Canelo would definitely win the fight versus the first fight he had 11 and 12 years ago. I'm like, are you serious? But this how people are. So Floyd Mayweather marketing his undefeated record, and that was a big thing. Again, on top of his skill set, on top of his beauty in the ring, his poetry and motion, his undefeated record that people wanted to see fall. So that was definitely a marketing ploy, and Floyd marketed and exploited the hell out of it, and I give him credit for that. So because of Floyd Mayweather, the last major boxing star, we mentioned this before, boxing stars are very hard to come by, especially when you step out of professional boxing and you bring in those casual fans. Again, you had Sugar Ray Leonard was a huge boxing star that transcended the sport that brought in casual fans. Mike Tyson, he went past the sport and he brought in casual fans. He transcended the sport. Oscar De La Hoya transcended the sport and brought in a lot of the female fans. So now a Floyd Mayweather. So really in the last 40, 50 years, you have 4, 5, maybe Marvin Hagler, 4 or 5 guys that transcended the sport and brought in a lot of casual fans. And Mayweather is on that short list. So because of that, his undefeated record, he fought the fighters that they wanted him to fight, and he whipped all of them. But because he retired undefeated, people so used to that. So people, young people now who grew up watching Mayweather fight, watch him go undefeated, now have this belief that if a fighter loses a single fight, he's overrated and he sucks. And that's what we mean by the Mayweather Effect. Recently, we had a coworker who thought that the great champion, Inoue, lost. And I said, no, it wasn't that Inoue, it was another Inoue. He goes, all right, cool, JD. Man, but I really don't want to see him lose. And he and I had to have a conversation. I was just like, well, listen, even if he did lose, does that make him any less of a fighter? And he kind of thought about it. He's like, well, no, that's only one fight. I was like, and you just fell victim to the Mayweather Effect, because you don't want this guy to lose a fight, and for some reason he becomes not a good fighter. Now, when a fighter loses, older fans would always say it wasn't his day and the guy was a better fighter that night. But something now, when you look at Twitter and social media, a guy sucks. We said this back when Ryan Garcia fought Tank Davis. And we said, whoever, even though we picked Tank to win the fight, but we said whoever loses, we're not going to do he's overrated, he's not that good, we're definitely not going to do that. And the people jump on the bandwagon and say Ryan Garcia was he was overrated, he sucks, and he wasn't that good. They came out the woodwork when Errol Spence was dominated by Terrence Crawford. He sucks, he's overrated, he's this, he's that. Now mind you, the man lost one fight. You just saw that with Devin Haney. With his loss to Ryan Garcia, that's probably going to be overturned. Everybody jump out the woodworks. Devin Haney sucks, he's overrated, he's this, he's that. versus a guy might have just had a bad night, versus a guy who just lost to a better guy that day, but maybe we can hope for something next time. So we don't know where the mindset, well, we understand where the mindset has come from, but that kind of needs to change, because if you listen to people on Twitter, and quite frankly, even guys in the sports media will tell you that when a guy loses a single fight, he sucks. But what I find funny is the list of undefeated champions, it's a very small list. Joe Galsaki, the former super middleweight champion, went 46-0. We mentioned Floyd Mayweather, Ricardo Lopez, Rocky Marciano, the undefeated heavyweight champion, Sven Aki, the super middleweight champion, Dmitry Pirov, who only retired because of an injured back, Harry Simon, and Andre Ward. And there were a lot of fights that we wanted to see with Andre Ward. But again, most fighters who retire undefeated might have had that fight that they could have lost. Now, let's talk about Floyd Mayweather. He probably could have lost the first fight versus Jose Luis Castillo, the same Castillo who went on to have the greatest fight of all time against the late Diego Corrales. These questions if Andre Ward won the first fight versus a Sergey Kovalev. There's questions if Joe Galsaki beat Bernard Hopkins. So every fighter has had that one fight that he could have lost, even the undefeated fighters. But the Mayweather effect now is people believing that if a guy loses one fight, all of a sudden now he sucks. But we find this funny. Even though I mentioned a lot of these undefeated great champions, people with losses are generally seen as better fighters and greater champions. Even as great as Floyd Mayweather was, there are people that you would still put, or boxing fans would still put on top of their all-time list. For instance, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali has losses. He's still seen as one of the greatest fighters of all time. So does Sugar Ray Robinson. So does the aforementioned Sugar Ray Leonard. So does Lennox Lewis. A lot of Bernard Hopkins, Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns. Folks, Roberto Duran is still listed as people's top 5 fighters, even amongst other professional fighters, including Floyd Mayweather. And Roberto Duran once quit in a fight. Let that sink in. Folks, if boxing fans are going to adopt the mentality that a guy sucks because he loses a single fight, then folks, I could imagine what they would have said on March the 9th, 1971, the day after Joe Frazier beat Muhammad Ali. I would have loved to see the response the day after George Foreman knocks out Joe Frazier in 2 rounds. I would have loved to see the response the day after Muhammad Ali beats George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire. I would have loved to see the attitude of people February 11th, you just the time zone, February 11th, 1990, the day after Buster Douglas KO'd Mike Tyson. So it makes you wonder. This is a young fans thing, a Twitter world thing, but there is nothing to take away when a boxer loses one fight. He does not suck. He is not overrated. He just ran into a better guy that day. That's just what it is. Now, that fighter can always go back to the drawing board and fight a better fight. The same Sugar Ray Leonard who lost to Roberto Duran in Montreal came back with a different mindset and beat Roberto Duran in the famous No Mas fight. And that fight was chronicled on ESPN 30 for 30. And yet Roberto Duran is still seen as one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he once quit in a professional fight. And this is no knock on Duran, we're talking about the modern fight fan. But modern fight fans, stop with the attitudes and the belief that if a guy loses one fight, all of a sudden he sucks. Thomas the Hitman Hearns was knocked out in 3 rounds against Marvin Hagler in one of the greatest fights of all time. Are you telling me he sucks? Evander the Real Deal Holyfield, who's actually one of the most underrated all-time great fighters, lost fights against Riddick Bowe. Was he underrated but came back and beat Mike Tyson? Is Mike Tyson underrated? And say this about Mike Tyson. To this day, Mike Tyson is still loved, adored, and the man once lost in the greatest upset in not only heavyweight boxing history, but in the entire sports history. And Mike Tyson is still considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. He lost another fight, and we documented this, the first fight versus Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield started off that fight as a 25-1 underdog. By the time he stepped into the ring, the odds are down from 9-1, 6-1. That, too, was one of the great upsets in heavyweight boxing history. Does Mike Tyson suck? So is this one of those things where we disagree with the modern-day boxing fan? Now, let's compare this with MMA. Mixed martial artists. Guys lose fights in mixed martial arts. It's very rare that guys retire undefeated. It's very rare. Khabib did it. John Jones technically have one loss. Well, no, actually, rephrase that. He has one loss that really shouldn't be a loss, but you can make the argument that he didn't win the fight versus a Thiago. Either it was Dominic Reyes or Thiago, the guy Thiago. I think it was Santos, but I do forget his last name. You can make an argument that John Jones lost that fight. But Khabib retired undefeated. Even Gracie lost, Shamrock lost, Dan Severn lost, Don Fry lost, Matt Hughes lost, George St. Pierre lost, Chuck Liddell lost, Tito Ortiz lost. And these guys are considered UFC Hall of Famers and all-time greats. And they have multiple losses on their record. I think with just GSP, I think GSP has he has two losses. He lost once against Matt Hughes and the other one against Matt Serra. So GSP has two losses. Anderson Silva, he has losses, and he's considered one of the top fighters of all time in the UFC. So we just find that where boxing fans, this has to change. We cannot keep thinking that a guy sucks, he's overrated, he's not this, he's not that, because a guy loses one fight. It just was not his day. He lost to a better fighter on that day. Yes, you can say maybe some kinks in his game was exposed, but again, he lost to a better fighter that day. So when you say he was exposed, his defense was exposed, that is all encompassing. He lost to a better fighter that day. It's simple as that. That boxer, he did not have his best performance, and he lost to a better fighter that day. That's why they get into the ring. That's why they fight the fights. Yes, we can look at first fights and say, we're not too sure about a rematch. We have other fights that we would not mind seeing a rematch, and guys who have come back and they've won the rematch. So modern fight fans, please stop falling for the Mayweather effect. We need to let this go. Most fighters are not going to retire undefeated. That's just what it is. Very few modern fighters now are undefeated. Tank Davis, I think one of the Charlo brothers, Terrence Bud Crawford, Shakur Stevenson. So we're talking about four guys that are undefeated. It's a very rare thing in a sport of boxing. If you keep fighting the top competition, at some point you might have a loss in your record. And nothing that is going to happen to Tank, Bud, the Charlo brother, Shakur Stevenson is going to tell me if they lose a fight, they suck, they're overrated, and they were never that good. No, they lost that fight that day to a better fighter. So boxing fans, we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to do better. Cause that's very dangerous on social media, because it starts to spread that message that when a guy loses one fight, all of a sudden he's not that good, he sucks, and he's overrated. That just has to stop. So that's definitely our 2 cents. Definitely let us know what you all think in the comment section. And until the next time, it's Chin Check Radio signing out. And you can always reach out to us at chinchecksportsradio@gmail.com. Once again, that's chinchecksportsradio@gmail.com.